The world's greatest engineering secrets are buried under the desert. Beneath the endless, silent sands lie entire forgotten worlds, networks of technology so advanced they seem to defy their own time. This is the hidden chapter of medieval history, where ancient engineers mastered their harsh environments in ways we are only beginning to understand. By the end of this journey, you will see the desert not as a barren wasteland, but as the world's greatest archive of human ingenuity. How did entire cities thrive beneath the ground, and what caused these brilliant societies to vanish so completely? Their stories of resilience hold powerful lessons for our own future. What do you think it takes for a civilization to not just survive, but truly flourish against impossible odds? It is a landscape of extremes where the very forces that erase life can also protect its memory. This is the great paradox of the desert. While wind and sand scour the surface, the arid climate beneath creates a perfect seal. Moisture is the great enemy of history, rotting wood, dissolving cloth, and erasing the subtle traces of human hands. But here, the dry air and relentless sun act as a natural preservative, halting the decay that would consume an object in a matter of years anywhere else. In this suspended state, fragile artifacts endure for centuries. A woven basket, its intricate pattern still sharp, a wooden tool handle still bearing the grip marks of its owner. Even the delicate remains of food stores and textiles can survive, offering whispers of color and texture from a vanished world. This environmental time capsule has safeguarded the most crucial evidence of all, the engineered bones of these societies. In wetter climates, an ancient irrigation canal would soon fill with silt and vanish, its purpose and design lost. But in the desert, these hydrological marvels are often found intact, their carefully sloped channels and control gates clearly visible, etched into the earth as if they were completed yesterday. The layouts of entire settlements, from the main avenues to the smallest alleyways, remain stamped upon the ground. Without layers of soil and overgrowth to obscure them, archaeologists can walk these streets and literally see the blueprint of a community, understanding how people moved, worked, and lived together. This remarkable preservation grants us something rare, a direct window. We are not just theorizing about their capabilities, we are examining the very tools they built and the systems they operated. We can trace the path of a water channel from its mountain source to a distant field, appreciating the sheer scale of their planning. We can study the joinery in a preserved timber, understanding their woodworking skill. Each artifact saved by the desert's dry embrace is a silent testament to a society that did not merely endure its environment, but mastered it with thoughtful, deliberate innovation. The silence of the sands, it turns out, is not empty. It is a library, and every grain holds a page. Yet to truly grasp their genius, we must look beyond the preserved objects to the systems they built. One invention stands as a testament to their mastery over the desert's greatest scarcity, water. Deep beneath the sun-baked earth, a hidden river flows. It is not fed by rain, but by the careful hands of engineers who understood the language of the landscape. They created the Kanat, a subterranean aqueduct of breathtaking simplicity and profound impact. Imagine a mother well dug deep into a mountainside, tapping a hidden aquifer. From this source, a gently sloping tunnel is carved, just enough for a single person to crawl through, stretching for miles across the barren plain. At regular intervals, vertical shafts plunge from the desert surface down to this tunnel, used first for excavation and then for maintenance and ventilation. This is not a chaotic dig, it is an act of precise surveying. The slope must be perfect, just enough for gravity to pull the water along its journey, but not so steep that it erodes the tunnel walls with destructive force. The entire system operates in cool, silent darkness, protecting the precious water from the evaporating heat above. The result is a reliable, year-round spring emerging at the tunnel's end, creating an oasis where none should exist. This was the lifeblood of empires. In the vast deserts of Persia, known today as Iran, networks of qanats transformed the dashed Ekavia, a place whose name means desert of salt, into a cradle of agriculture. They sustained legendary cities like Yazd, where the flow from these hidden channels fed public baths, lush gardens, and bustling markets. The technology spread with Islamic scholarship, reaching across the Arabian Peninsula and North Africa, enabling settlements to flourish far from any visible river. But the Kanat is more than a water pipe, it is a blueprint for society. Its construction required immense communal effort, a shared investment in survival. Its maintenance demanded cooperation and established clear rules for water distribution, often based on time shares measured by water clocks. This was sustainable engineering in its purest form, using gravity instead of pumps, respecting the aquifer's natural recharge rate, and creating a legacy that could last for centuries. Some qanats in Iran still function today, a quiet hum of ancient hydrology beneath modern streets. In a world grappling with water scarcity, these forgotten tunnels offer a powerful lesson. They remind us that the most advanced solution is not always the most complex one, but the one that works in harmony with the world it inhabits. But water was only the beginning of their mastery. To find the next chapter of this story, we must travel to a landscape that looks less like our world and more like the surface of another planet. In the heart of medieval Anatolia, a region called Cappadocia is a stone forest of surreal, cone-shaped rock formations. This soft volcanic stone, called tuff, is easily carved yet remarkably stable. And here, communities did not just channel water, they carved entire worlds directly into the earth. Beneath the whimsical fairy chimneys above, a hidden universe sprawls downward. This is not a single cave or a simple shelter. It is a meticulously planned, multi-level metropolis existing entirely underground. Places like Derinkuyu and Kanat are not just historical sites, they are feats of geotechnical engineering and urban planning on a staggering scale. Picture a labyrinth descending 8, 10, even 18 stories deep into the living rock. Each level is a functional district of a city. There are living quarters with carved benches and shelves, spacious communal kitchens with blackened ceilings from centuries of cooking fires, stables for livestock, storerooms for grain and oil, and even dedicated workshops and wine presses. Long, sloping corridors connect the levels, while thousands of hand-carved ventilation shafts, some stretching over 100 feet to the surface, provided a constant supply of fresh air to the deepest chambers. This was a completely self-contained ecosystem designed for extended habitation. But why go to such extraordinary lengths? These cities were built as refuges, sanctuaries carved from necessity. The open plains above were vulnerable, exposed to passing armies and the relentless elements. When danger approached, the entire population could vanish. They would retreat underground, sealing themselves in with their most ingenious defense, massive, circular stone doors. These slabs, weighing several tons, were set into grooves and could be rolled into place from the inside, blocking the narrow corridors completely. From within, they could control the air supply and access to the water wells that plunged even deeper than the living quarters. A community of thousands could live securely for months, hidden from the world. The true marvel is in the foresight. This was not a panicked, last-minute excavation. It was a generational project, a communal investment in resilience. They understood the properties of their stone, carving rooms with rounded corners to better distribute weight and prevent collapse. They planned for waste management, for communication between levels, for worship in underground chapels adorned with simple crosses. Every aspect of daily life and collective security was engineered into the rock. The existence of these cities speaks to a profound understanding of both human need and geological possibility. It represents a society that looked at a soft stone cliff and saw not a barrier but a promise of safety. They transformed the very ground beneath their feet into a shield, proving that sometimes the greatest strength is found not in rising higher but in building a sanctuary deep within. The silence of the desert was broken by the rustle of parchment and the scratch of a quill. While empires rose and fell on the surface, a quieter, more enduring revolution was taking place in the scriptoriums of monasteries and the great libraries of the Islamic world. Here, medieval scholars became the guardians of a fading past, meticulously copying and annotating ancient texts on geography, hydrology, and mechanics. They were not merely scribes, they were curators of a survival manual for harsh lands, preserving the hard-won engineering wisdom of Rome, Persia, and beyond. This patient work of preservation created a fragile but vital chain, linking the achievements of antiquity to the ambitious builders of the medieval era. Without these copied manuscripts, the sophisticated principles behind a qanat or the architectural knowledge needed to stabilize an underground city might have been lost to the shifting sands of time. The scholars understood that to conquer a landscape, you first had to understand its logic, and that logic was recorded in the books they saved. This preserved knowledge found its way onto another crucial tool, the medieval map. To our modern eyes, these maps can appear strange, often filled with symbolic illustrations and theological motifs rather than precise coastlines, but they were never meant to be satellite photographs. They were functional guides to a dangerous world. A beautifully drawn dragon at the edge of the page might mark unknown territories, but a small, careful notation of a well or a reliable oasis was a lifeline. These maps charted the invisible geography of survival, marking caravan stops, mountain passes where snowmelt could be captured, and ancient trade routes that had been viable for centuries. They distilled the collective experience of countless travelers into a single, portable sheet of vellum. For an engineer planning a new settlement in the desert, such a map did not just show where to go, it whispered where the water might be hidden and where the ground was firm enough to build upon. The most famous of these routes was the Silk Road, but its true cargo was far more valuable than silk or spices. It was a highway for ideas. As caravans moved between the markets of Samarkand and Baghdad, Alexandria and Cordoba, they carried more than goods, they carried conversations. A Persian hydrologist might share the precise slope needed for a Kanat tunnel with a North African trader. A builder from Anatolia could explain techniques for ventilating deep spaces to an architect from the Arabian Peninsula. Methods for digging deeper wells, for mixing plaster that could withstand desert winds, for constructing wind catchers that cooled buildings. All these innovations traveled along these dusty tracks, passed from one culture to the next in a continuous exchange of environmental wisdom. This is how the Kanat technology, born in the highlands of Persia, journeyed across continents to water the gardens of Moorish Spain. It was a cumulative legacy, each generation adding its own refinements to an ancient blueprint. This reveals a profound truth about these medieval societies. Their greatest engineering projects were not isolated acts of genius, but the culmination of a vast, interconnected intellectual network. They stood upon the shoulders of giants, blending Roman aqueduct principles with Persian subterranean hydrology and local material science. The forgotten cities beneath the desert were not born in a vacuum. They were the physical manifestation of knowledge carefully preserved, diligently shared, and courageously applied. It was a collective effort spanning languages and faiths, all directed toward a single, universal goal, not just to survive in a beautiful but brutal world, but to carve out a place of permanence within it. Their legacy challenges our modern notion of innovation as a solitary breakthrough, reminding us that true progress is often a conversation across centuries, written in stone and channeled through water, waiting beneath the sand for us to listen. These preserved networks of knowledge culminated in structures that stand as monuments to communal trust. Rising from the shimmering heat of the Sahara are castles not of stone but of earth itself. The Ksar is a fortress of a different kind, built not to house an army but to secure a community's future. Picture a towering, honey-colored complex of sun-baked clay, its sheer walls and square towers forming a single, imposing silhouette against the endless desert sky. This is not a palace for a king, but a collective bank, a granary, and a sanctuary for an entire village. In regions like Morocco's Dra Valley, these structures were the ultimate expression of desert engineering, designed to protect the most precious resource of all, the surplus that guaranteed survival through lean years. Their thick, mud brick walls served a dual genius. By day, they absorbed the fierce heat, and by night, they slowly released it, creating a stable, temperate environment within. Narrow, winding alleyways between the tall buildings cast deep, cooling shadows, while interior courtyards trapped cooler air. This was passive climate control mastered centuries before the term existed. The layout itself was a puzzle of defense. A single, heavy gate was the only entrance, leading to a labyrinth of connected multi-story buildings. Storerooms were placed on upper floors, safe from flooding and easier to defend, their doors small and thresholds high to deter quick theft. Here, the wealth of the community was literally walled up: grain from the Oasis palms, precious dates, salt from distant mines, and sometimes even gold from trans-Saharan caravans. The Ksar was a living system. Its architecture reflected a profound social contract. Everyone contributed to the common store, and everyone had a stake in its protection. It turned individual vulnerability into collective strength. During times of conflict or raiding, the entire population could retreat inside, drawing up ladders and sealing the gate, turning the Ksar into an impregnable citadel with its own water source and enough supplies to outlast a siege. But its true purpose was not war, it was resilience. It allowed a society to flourish in a land of scarcity by engineering security, both from human threat and from the unpredictable desert itself. The Ksar stands as a powerful symbol, a reminder that in the harshest environments, the greatest structures are built not from greed, but from shared need and mutual trust. The blueprints of these lost worlds are written in the earth itself, in a language of shadow and density. To read them, modern archaeology has traded the lone explorer's pick for a suite of technologies that listen to the ground without ever touching it. High above the desert, satellites equipped with sensors scan vast expanses, detecting minute differences in soil moisture or vegetation health. A patch of barley that grows slightly taller and greener in an otherwise uniform field may be tracing the nutrient-rich fill of a long-buried irrigation ditch, its outline revealed from space as a ghostly green signature. This is the first clue, a whisper from the past captured in pixels. Closer to the surface, ground-penetrating radar sends pulses of energy into the sand, painting a sonogram of the subsurface. It reveals anomalies, shapes that are too regular, too angular to be natural stone, hinting at the foundations of a wall, the hollow channel of a collapsed qanat, or the compacted floor of a courtyard. From the air, specialized photography at just the right angle of sunlight can unveil crop marks or soil marks, faint discolorations that trace the outlines of forgotten roads and property boundaries, a phantom city map projected onto the present-day landscape. These non-invasive methods create a preliminary sketch, allowing researchers to ask precise questions of the sand before a single trowel is lifted. When careful excavation does begin, the real narrative emerges layer by literal layer through the science of stratigraphy. Archaeologists painstakingly peel back time, examining each distinct stratum of soil and debris. A layer filled with ash and charcoal might speak of a catastrophic fire. A sterile layer of wind-blown sand could indicate a period of abandonment. Finding a coin minted during the reign of a known caliph in a specific layer helps anchor that entire level to a historical date, creating a chronological backbone for the entire site. This meticulous process allows them to reconstruct the sequence of events, to see how a simple wellhead was later expanded into a fortified gate, or how a residential quarter was gradually converted into storerooms as the community's needs changed. It is forensic storytelling where the soil itself is the primary witness. The goal is no longer simply to find treasure, but to understand the blueprint, to comprehend the logic behind the placement of a granary relative to a well, or the way a settlement's layout shifted to adapt to a changing climate. By combining the bird's eye view of technology with the intimate, granular focus of the excavation trench, we are learning to see the desert not as an empty page, but as a meticulously annotated manuscript. Every subtle variation in the soil, every magnetic anomaly, is a sentence in a long-forgotten story of survival, waiting for the right tools to give it a voice. The true foundation of these monumental structures was not stone or clay, but a shared agreement. To carve a water channel for 50 miles through solid rock, or to hollow out an 18-story city, demanded more than brilliant engineering. It required a society engineered for cooperation. This was a symphony of human effort where every role was vital and every contribution was counted. At the heart of this system were the master diggers, the mukanis. These were not mere laborers but highly skilled artisans whose knowledge was a closely guarded inheritance, passed from father to son like a sacred text. They understood geology, how to read the strata of earth to avoid a collapse. They mastered hydrology, calculating the imperceptible slope that would keep water flowing without eroding their tunnel. Their work was dangerous, conducted in pitch darkness with only oil lamps, in spaces where a single misjudgment could be fatal. They were the surgeons of the earth, and their expertise made the impossible merely difficult. Financing such a decades-long project required its own innovation. Unlike a royal palace built by decree, a qanat was often a communal investment. Wealthy landowners, merchants, and even small farmers would pool their resources, buying shares in the future water rights. This created a powerful incentive for everyone involved. The success of the tunnel meant a direct return on their investment, a literal flow of capital. The resulting legal frameworks were remarkably sophisticated. Water shares were meticulously documented, often measured in time units, like the right to the flow for one full day every week. This was not just about fairness, it was about sustainability. By giving everyone a stake in the system, it ensured there would always be someone motivated to maintain it, to clear silt from the channels and repair the walls. The entire community became the guardian of its own lifeline. The labor itself often took the form of a corvée, a traditional system of communal work owed to the project. Farmers would contribute their time during the agricultural off-season, working alongside the mukanis. This was not forced servitude, but a recognized social duty, a direct investment in the security and prosperity of their families and neighbors. The act of building together forged a powerful social bond. Everyone could point to a section of the tunnel they had helped to dig, or a chamber in the underground city they had helped to carve. The project became a physical manifestation of their collective will, a monument to what they could achieve not as individuals, but as a coordinated whole. This reveals the profound insight behind these ancient achievements. The greatest challenge in the desert was not technical, it was human. The brilliant geometry of a qanat or the perfect ventilation of Derinkuyu are testaments to intellect, but their existence is a testament to trust. They required a society that could plan beyond a single lifetime, that could enforce complex agreements, and that could motivate thousands of people to work toward a benefit they might not fully enjoy for years. In this light, the social organization, the legal codes, the shared rituals of labor were themselves a form of engineering. They were the operating system, the invisible software that allowed the hardware of stone and water to function. It prompts a reflective question for our own time. We possess tools and machines those diggers could never have dreamed of, but could we muster the same unity of purpose, the same patient commitment to a common future, to build something that would last 1,000 years? Their legacy suggests that the mortar holding civilization together is not cement, but consensus. Yet the ultimate expression of this communal spirit is found not in a tunnel or a fortress, but in a breathtaking inversion of architecture. In the vast, arid expanses of the Thar Desert in medieval India, communities did not build up toward the sky. They engineered a magnificent descent into the earth. These are the stepwells known as bayolis, and they are far more than simple water holes. They are subterranean palaces dedicated to a single, vital resource. To approach one is to encounter a sheer opening in the flat ground, from which a grand symmetrical staircase cascades downward, tier after tier, deep into the cool darkness. The walls lining this descent are not bare stone. They are adorned with a symphony of carved columns, intricate balconies, and sculpted deities watching over the passage. Each step down is a journey away from the blistering heat, toward a still, dark pool that seems to hold the very essence of life. Built over centuries from around the 7th to the 19th, these structures solved a critical hydraulic problem with elegant intelligence. In a region where the water table could fluctuate dramatically between monsoon rains and punishing dry seasons, a simple well with a bucket and rope would become useless as the water retreated far below. The stepwell's design elegantly conquered this. By constructing a staircase that followed the water down, it ensured access remained constant, step by step, all the way to the lowest level. It was a dynamic solution to a moving target, a testament to deep observation of the land's rhythms, but their function was beautifully multifaceted. In the scorching summer months, the stepwell became a natural cooling retreat. The temperature could drop significantly just a few levels down, making the upper galleries and pavilions favored places for community gatherings, for merchants to rest, and for travelers to find respite. They transformed a utilitarian task, collecting water, into a social event. Women would descend together, their clay pots balanced on their heads, turning the chore into an opportunity for conversation and shared experience within a space of stunning beauty. This is where engineering transcended mere mechanics and became woven into the spiritual fabric of life. The water was not just a physical substance, it was considered sacred, a gift from the earth and the divine. The carvings of gods and goddesses, of mythological scenes and geometric patterns, consecrated the space. Drawing water became an act intertwined with reverence, and the architecture itself elevated a daily necessity into a ceremonial passage. The stepwell stands as a profound lesson in holistic design. It did not separate the technical from the cultural, the practical from the sacred. It fused them into a single, awe-inspiring monument that served the body, cooled the community, and nourished the spirit. In a forgotten world beneath the desert, it reminds us that the most enduring human creations are those that answer our deepest needs, not just for survival, but for meaning, beauty, and connection. The climate that shaped these civilizations was never a fixed stage, but a dynamic and often unpredictable force. Across the medieval world, long-term shifts in temperature and rainfall quietly redrew the maps of what was possible. Scholars identify periods like the medieval warm period, a stretch of several centuries where global temperatures rose, and the later Little Ice Age, which brought cooler conditions. These were not mere statistical blips, they were profound environmental events that reshaped lives. In some regions, the warming climate could bring longer growing seasons and open new trade routes. In others, particularly the arid zones we have been exploring, it could tip a delicate balance. Reliable monsoon patterns might falter, ancient rivers could shift their courses, and the creeping advance of sand, a process called desertification, could slowly strangle once fertile land. This was the ultimate test for the engineers of the desert. The brilliant systems we admire, the Kanats and the Stepwells, were not just symbols of prosperity. They were acts of resilience, direct responses to the creeping threat of scarcity. A community might deepen its well as the water table dropped, or extend a Kanat tunnel further into the mountains to chase a retreating aquifer. The fortified Ksar, with its vast storerooms, was a buffer against increasingly unpredictable harvests. Their entire way of life became an ongoing adaptation to a changing world. This historical lens offers a powerful and sobering parallel for our own time. We are not the first generation to face environmental instability, though our challenges are on a global scale. The medieval record shows us two paths. There are stories of success where societies read the signs early, invested in communal infrastructure, and managed their resources with a long-term view. They flourished because their engineering was paired with foresight. But there are also silent ruins, settlements abandoned when the water finally ran dry, when the maintenance of a Kanat became too great for a diminished population, or when a changing climate made their entire agricultural model obsolete. These sites are not just archaeological curiosities, they are case studies in the long-term consequences of how a society relates to its environment. They teach us that technological brilliance alone is not enough. A Kanat is a marvel, but it requires a social contract to maintain it. A stepwell is a masterpiece, but it depends on a sustainable water table. The forgotten world beneath the desert whispers a crucial lesson. Resilience is not just about building stronger walls, but about cultivating the collective wisdom to care for the systems that sustain us. In their adaptations, we see a reflection of our own crossroads, reminding us that the most important design we must engineer is a sustainable relationship with the planet we all call home. The water that flowed from a Kanat was more than a physical resource, it was a promise. In the poetry and art of the medieval world, the oasis became a symbol so powerful it transcended geography. It was the garden in the wilderness, a refuge carved by divine favor, a living metaphor for paradise itself. This was not an abstract idea, it was a cultural force that directly shaped the world they built. The engineered oasis represented the ultimate human aspiration, to bring order to chaos, to coax life from barrenness. It stood as a testament to the belief that through knowledge, cooperation, and faith, they could create a corner of Eden right here on Earth. This symbolism found its most beautiful expression in the formal gardens of Persian and Islamic tradition. These were not just plots of land, they were philosophical landscapes. Designed with perfect geometric precision, they were divided into 4 quarters by channels of flowing water, representing the 4 rivers of paradise described in sacred texts. The careful arrangement of trees, flowers, and fragrant herbs was an artistic composition, a deliberate echo of the celestial garden. Walking through such a space was meant to be a spiritual experience, a sensory reminder of harmony, balance, and the blessings of creation. Every element was intentional, from the shade of a cypress tree to the sound of water trickling through a stone channel. This reveals the profound depth behind their engineering. Digging a canal was not just a chore, it was an act of world-making. Planting an orchard in the desert was not merely agriculture, it was a declaration of hope. Their technology was never purely functional, it was always intertwined with meaning. By transforming a patch of sand into a lush, productive haven, they were physically manifesting their highest ideals, proving that human effort, when guided by wisdom and a reverence for natural laws, could participate in the divine work of creation. The Oasis, therefore, was their masterpiece in every sense. It was a technical solution to survival, a social project requiring immense cooperation, and a work of art that embedded their deepest cultural values into the living landscape. It asked a silent, enduring question of everyone who entered its shade. If we can make this place beautiful and abundant against all odds, what else might we be capable of? A single lantern in the endless night could mean the difference between survival and oblivion. Across the Silk Road and the Great Saharan routes, the Caravanserai was that lantern, a beacon of engineered hospitality in a sea of sand. More than just an inn, it was a fortress of commerce, a hydrological station, and a diplomatic hub, all fused into one monumental structure. Picture a vast, square compound with towering, windowless walls of sun-baked brick or stone, its single heavy gate the only break in the formidable facade. Inside, a different world unfolded, a bustling micro-city organized around a massive central courtyard. Here, camels and horses, exhausted from weeks of travel, could finally rest in shaded stables that lined the perimeter. Merchants found secure storerooms for their precious cargoes of silk, spices, and incense, while simple, clean lodgings offered a safe space to sleep. The entire design served a single, vital purpose: to sustain the lifeblood of long-distance trade by protecting its human and animal engines. This was logistics made physical. Constructing such an outpost in true isolation required masterful planning. The first and greatest challenge was always water. Engineers selected sites near reliable, if hidden, sources, then amplified them. Deep wells were dug within the courtyard walls, tapping aquifers far below. Elaborate underground cisterns captured and stored precious rainwater, filtered and cooled by the earth itself. A caravanserai without a guaranteed water supply was a death trap, so its hydraulic systems were as critical as its walls. Those walls themselves were lessons in defensive architecture, thick enough to withstand siege, with corner towers providing overlapping fields of view and a single, easily defended gate that could be barred from within. This security was not paranoid, it was a promise. It guaranteed that a merchant's wealth, often representing a lifetime's investment, would be safe for the night. That promise engineered trust on a continental scale. A trader from Venice could plan a journey to Samarkand because he knew, at intervals of roughly one day's travel, there would be a haven following a recognizable blueprint. This network of standardized safety transformed sporadic, perilous journeys into a predictable system. Within those walls, something beyond trade flourished. The shared courtyard became a grand stage for cultural exchange. A Persian scholar might debate astronomy with a Chinese alchemist by a well. A Byzantine soldier could share tales with a Mongol horseman over a simple meal. Ideas, languages, and innovations circulated as freely as the goods being unpacked. The caravanserai did not just facilitate commerce. It catalyzed the cross-pollination of knowledge that fueled the medieval world's intellectual golden ages. In this way, these desert way stations were the unsung infrastructure of globalization, proving that civilization expands not by conquest alone, but by building nodes of connection and safe passage. They turned the barren, intimidating desert into a traversable highway, stitching continents together one fortified courtyard at a time. The walls of a caravanserai did more than keep danger out, they held a quiet coolness within, a secret woven into their very substance. This comfort was not an accident, but the result of a deep, intimate conversation between the builders and the land itself. Without access to modern concrete or steel, these engineers became masters of material science, turning the humble elements beneath their feet into sophisticated climate control systems. Their primary building block was adobe, a simple mixture of earth, water, and often straw formed into bricks and dried in the sun. This was not a primitive compromise, it was a brilliant adaptation. Adobe possesses a quality called high thermal mass, meaning it absorbs heat very slowly. Through the scorching desert day, the thick adobe walls would soak up the sun's relentless energy, preventing it from penetrating into the interior spaces. Then, as the temperature plummeted at night, the walls would slowly release that stored warmth back into the living quarters. This natural regulation created a stable, temperate environment inside, a stark contrast to the extreme swings outside. It was passive architecture at its most elegant, using the physics of the material itself to do the work of a modern air conditioner or heater. But adobe alone was not enough to withstand the desert's abrasive winds and rare but torrential rains. For this, they developed sophisticated plasters. These were not mere coatings but engineered skins. Using locally sourced clays, gypsum, or lime, they created mixtures that could be smoothed over the rough brick, forming a hard, protective shell. Some plasters were even designed to be decorative, taking pigments from local minerals to add bands of color or intricate geometric patterns to a building's facade, blending utility with beauty. In regions like Cappadocia, the material itself dictated an entirely different approach. There, builders worked with tuff, a soft volcanic stone. Its relative softness made it perfect for carving, allowing teams to hollow out entire cities with hand tools. Yet, once carved and left in place, this same stone exhibited remarkable compressive strength, able to support the weight of multiple stories stacked above it. The builders understood this duality perfectly. They exploited the stone's workability during construction, then relied on its inherent stability for long-term safety. Every material choice reveals an empirical, hands-on understanding of local geology and climate. They did not import marble from distant quarries or force an unsuitable design onto the landscape. Instead, they asked a simple, profound question: what does this place provide, and how can we use it to its best advantage? The result was architecture that was inherently sustainable and biodegradable. When a structure made of earth and straw was eventually abandoned, it would simply erode back into the ground from which it came, leaving little trace and no permanent scar on the environment. This is perhaps their most timeless lesson, a masterclass in working with nature rather than against it. Their buildings were not imposed upon the desert. They were an extension of it, shaped by its logic and designed to return to it gracefully. In an age obsessed with complex, energy-intensive materials, their legacy whispers a powerful alternative. True resilience often lies in understanding and embracing the quiet genius of what is already there. The true strength of a civilization is measured not only in its walls but in its words. Beyond the grand caravanserais and deep wells, the desert safeguarded another kind of treasure, one far more fragile yet infinitely more expansive. Scattered across the sands, from the remote valleys of Egypt to the isolated oases of the Sahara, were sanctuaries of the mind. Monasteries like the ancient fortress of St. Catherine at the foot of Mount Sinai, and scholarly libraries in towns like Timbuktu became improbable arks for human knowledge. Within their thick, protective walls, scribes labored by lamplight, their quills scratching across parchment and papyrus in a race against time itself. The desert's relentless dryness, so hostile to life, became the unexpected guardian of these delicate pages, preserving inks from blurring and fibers from crumbling for centuries longer than any humid climate could allow. These collections were not narrow in scope. Alongside profound religious and philosophical texts rested practical manuals of survival and innovation. There were treatises on geometry for surveying land and digging canals, astronomical charts for navigation and planting, medical texts detailing herbal remedies found in arid regions, and engineering scrolls outlining the principles of load-bearing arches and water screw design. Each manuscript was a thread in a vast tapestry of understanding, a direct line to the technical discussions that informed the master diggers and city planners. The tragic loss of so many of these libraries, whether through the slow decay of neglect, the upheaval of conflict, or simply the passage of forgotten centuries, represents a silent catastrophe. It is the vanishing of an intellectual heritage as profound and irreplaceable as any city swallowed by dunes. We are left with fragments, with hints of a much larger conversation. What revolutionary agricultural technique was described on a papyrus that turned to dust? What elegant solution to water storage was lost when a library's roof collapsed? These lost collections remind us with poignant clarity that the Kanats and Stepwells we can still see are merely the physical manifestations of a deeper foundation. They were built first as ideas debated in courtyards, sketched on tablets, and meticulously copied in silent scriptoriums. The invisible architecture of thought, of shared and preserved knowledge, is what truly allowed stone to be shaped and water to be commanded. The desert hid not just cities but the very blueprints for civilization. A different kind of river flowed beneath the sands of the Sahara, one born from ingenuity rather than rainfall. In the vast, sun-scorched expanse of North Africa, communities perfected another masterpiece of hidden hydrology, the Foggara. While its cousin, the Persian Kanat, tapped deep mountain aquifers, the Foggara was a master of subtlety, designed for a landscape where every drop was a prisoner of the air or a secret held just beneath the surface. This system of gently sloping underground tunnels was engineered to intercept shallow groundwater tables, often just a few meters below the dry riverbeds known as wadis. In some ingenious adaptations, the tunnels and their ventilation shafts were even designed to capture the rare condensation from the cool night air, funneling minuscule, precious contributions into the network. From a mother well dug upstream, the tunnel would stretch for miles, sometimes over 20, its slope meticulously calculated so that the seepage collected along its length would flow by gravity alone toward the oasis waiting in the distance. The end point was a sudden, miraculous emergence of water into a sunlit basin, a life-giving surprise in the absolute emptiness of the desert. This was the technology that made places like Algeria's Mzab Valley not just habitable but a cradle of culture. The water from the Foggara was the sole reason the dense palm groves could exist, their roots drinking from carefully managed channels that spread from the main outlet like veins from a heart. The entire settlement, from the fortress like granary to the whitewashed houses, was organized around this hydraulic pulse. But the true engineering marvel was not in the tunnel itself, but in the social machine that maintained it. A Foggara is not a build-it-and-forget-it project. It is a living, breathing system in constant danger of collapse from silt or cave-ins. Its survival depended on a continuous, rotating duty of maintenance, a communal responsibility governed by ancient, strict water-sharing codes. The right to water was divided into time-based shares, meticulously recorded and respected, often aligned with the needs of the palm groves and the community's prayer schedule. This was more than law, it was a sacred covenant with survival. The system enabled the flourishing of Ibadi Muslim communities in one of the most hostile environments on Earth, and their unique urban planning reflected this harmony. Towns were built on rocky outcrops to preserve every inch of arable land below for the gardens. Houses were packed tightly together, sharing walls to provide mutual shade and thermal mass, with narrow, winding streets designed to funnel any breeze. At the physical and spiritual center of it all stood the mosque, its minaret also serving as a watchtower, a symbol of a society where faith, community, and environmental wisdom were inseparable strands of the same rope. The Foggara exemplifies perhaps the purest form of sustainable engineering, one where the technology is utterly dependent on and reflective of a deeply cooperative social order. It asks us a quiet question: can the most advanced system be the one that most deeply binds a community together in care for their shared lifeline? These roads of commerce were themselves monumental works of civil engineering. The Silk Road, the Trans-Saharan routes, the ancient Incense Road, we often picture them as simple lines on a map, trails worn by countless camel caravans. But they were far more than that. They were carefully curated corridors of survival, linear landscapes deliberately shaped by human hands to make the impossible journey possible. Before a single bolt of silk or an ounce of gold could move, the path itself had to be built. This meant carving steps into the sheer rock faces of mountain passes like those in the Pamirs, so laden animals could find secure footing. It meant constructing sturdy bridges of stone or wood across treacherous gorges, turning a deadly chasm into a crossing. It meant identifying and then enhancing the few reliable water sources in hundreds of miles of emptiness, digging wells deeper and building protective walls around precious oases to prevent them from being swallowed by the dunes. Every caravan stop, every fortified pass, was a node in a vast continent-spanning network of safety and supply. The flow of luxury goods, the silks and spices and salt and gold, was merely the visible current on the surface. What truly flowed was something more vital: assurance. A merchant could commit his fortune to a 2-year journey because he knew the route had been engineered for his success. He knew that at a specific point in the Taklamakan Desert, there was a caravanserai with a working well. He knew that a particular mountain pass, though terrifying, had been made traversable. This underlying infrastructure of guaranteed water, secure rest, and navigable terrain was the true product of collective investment. It transformed a blank space on the map into a highway. In this way, these trade corridors functioned as the internet of the ancient and medieval world. They were the physical broadband connecting distant hubs of innovation. A new design for a saddle that could distribute weight better for a camel, developed in Arabia, would travel east along the Silk Road. An improved technique for smelting iron, discovered in Central Asia, could travel west to Anatolia. The very concept of the Kanat or the Stepwell did not stay in one place. It migrated along these engineered pathways, carried not in scrolls alone, but in the stories and demonstrations of travelers. A master builder from Persia, resting at a caravanserai in the Kızılkum Desert, might sketch a diagram in the sand for a curious merchant from the Maghreb. This was how knowledge diffused, not by proclamation, but by practical necessity and shared problem-solving along a road built for exactly that purpose. These routes demonstrate a profound truth. Commerce is one of history's most powerful engines for large-scale environmental planning. It motivated societies to reshape geography itself, to tame mountains and interrogate deserts, all to forge a connection. The goods were the reason, but the enduring legacy was the corridor, a testament to a simple, powerful idea that prosperity is built not on what you have, but on the road you build to share it. The squeal of ancient wood against water echoed for centuries along the desert's fertile fringes, where great rivers like the Orontes in Syria carved ribbons of green through arid lands. Communities built monumental machines to lift life itself into the air. These were the Noria's water wheels of staggering scale, some towering over 20 meters high. Powered by nothing but the relentless push of the river current, they were feats of carpentry and hydraulic genius that turned the riverbank into a theater of perpetual motion. The city of Hama in Syria became synonymous with these giants, where their rhythmic groaning was the sound of the city's heartbeat, a constant mechanical song that meant survival. Building a Noria was an act of profound faith in both material and principle. Master woodworkers selected and seasoned timbers for years, joining them with complex mortise and tenon joints that could withstand immense hydraulic pressure and constant rotation. The design was elegantly simple yet demanded deep understanding. The current pushed against paddles mounted on the wheel's circumference, causing the entire structure to turn. As it rotated, wooden boxes or ceramic jars attached to the rim would dip into the river, fill with water, and be carried to the very top of the wheel's arc. There, gravity would take over, pouring the water into a waiting aqueduct that carried it far from the riverbank to irrigate vast fields and supply public fountains in the city. This was mechanical advantage on a grand, almost poetic scale, transforming horizontal flow into vertical lift without any animal or human labor. The Noria represents a fascinating counterpoint to the hidden, silent world of the Kanat. Where the Kanat was a secret whispered to the earth, the Noria was a bold, roaring declaration on the surface. It represented a philosophy of harnessing visible, abundant surface water with spectacular machinery, rather than patiently coaxing hidden moisture from the deep earth. This diversity of approach is key to understanding the medieval mind. There was no single solution to desert living, only a vast and adaptable toolkit. A society might use qanats to tap distant aquifers in the highlands, employ foggaras to gather shallow groundwater in the plains, and build colossal norias to commandeer a mighty river's flow, all within the same cultural sphere. Each method was a response to a specific environmental opportunity. The Noria's legacy is one of public spectacle and communal benefit. It was not a technology hidden away, but a proud landmark, a symbol of a city's prosperity and engineering prowess. Its endless cycle, lifting water tirelessly day and night, stood as a powerful metaphor for human ingenuity working in concert with nature's forces. In a forgotten world beneath the desert, some solutions were carved in secrecy, while others turned the river itself into a wheel, forever lifting life toward the sun. The deep grooves in a Noria's timber were not just cut by water, but by a sense of higher purpose. In these medieval societies, the line between a technical blueprint and a spiritual calling was often beautifully blurred. Religion provided more than just moral guidance. It offered a powerful, unifying framework that could organize entire communities around projects spanning generations. To construct a qanat that would bring life to a barren valley was not merely an engineering challenge, it was an act of profound piety. In Islamic tradition, such a project could be considered a form of sadaqah jariyah, a continuous charity. The idea was that any public good that provided lasting benefit, like a well, a bridge, or an irrigation system, would earn spiritual reward for its builder for as long as it continued to serve people, even long after their passing. This transformed the backbreaking labor of digging a tunnel into a spiritual investment, a legacy written in water and stone. It ensured that the wealthiest patron and the humblest digger were united in a shared, sacred mission, guaranteeing the community commitment and patient capital needed for such immense undertakings. Similarly, the majestic stepwells of India were not just reservoirs, they were devotional sites. Their stunning symmetrical descent mirrored a spiritual journey from the harsh, material world above down into the cool, life-giving depths, a metaphor for seeking truth and purity. The intricate carvings of deities on the walls made every visit for water an encounter with the divine, weaving daily necessity into the fabric of faith. This sacred dimension provided a powerful incentive for upkeep, as maintaining the structure was seen as maintaining a temple. In Christian desert monasteries, like those in Egypt or Cappadocia, managing sophisticated water systems and gardens was part of the monastic rule. Isolating themselves in the wilderness to be closer to God did not mean rejecting practical stewardship, it meant perfecting it. The careful channeling of a spring to nourish their community was an extension of their spiritual discipline, a way to create a self-sufficient Eden in the desert, reflecting heavenly order on earth. This interplay even shaped the very layouts of cities and buildings. Sacred geometry, using ratios and patterns believed to reflect cosmic harmony, informed the plans of gardens, courtyards, and mosques. The orientation of a structure toward Mecca, or the alignment of a temple to capture the sunrise on a specific holy day, were engineering problems solved with astronomical precision, all in service of faith. This fusion was the secret strength behind these enduring legacies. It meant that the practical need for water, security, and food was never just about survival. It was elevated into a collective spiritual imperative. The social fabric that supported a 50-mile qanat was woven with threads of shared belief, making the work a covenant with the future and with the divine. The project's success became a measure of communal righteousness, and its maintenance a sacred duty. In a forgotten world beneath the desert, the most resilient systems were those where the mortar between the stones was mixed with meaning, where every drop of water drawn was an answered prayer, and where the act of building was itself an act of faith. The stars above the desert were not just points of light, but a precise and vital map. In the high, arid plateaus of the medieval Islamic world, where the air was thin and the nights were exceptionally clear, scholars constructed monumental machines dedicated to measuring the cosmos. At places like the Maraghe Observatory in 13th century Persia, or the great complex built by the Timurid Prince Ulugh Beg in 15th century Samarkand, astronomy was not a passive study, but an immense engineering challenge. The goal was to track the movements of planets and stars with unprecedented accuracy, and to do that, they needed instruments of staggering scale and stability. These were not simple telescopes, but architectural wonders in their own right. Imagine a mural quadrant, a giant 90-degree arc of stone or metal embedded into a meridian wall, its curve meticulously calibrated. Or an armillary sphere, a skeletal model of the celestial spheres built from massive metal rings, each representing a different circle in the sky. These devices were often so large a person could walk inside them, and their construction demanded the precision of a master mason and the insight of a geometrician. The foundation had to be perfectly level and utterly immovable, immune to the subtle settling of the earth that could ruin measurements taken over decades. Aligning these instruments with true north and the celestial pole was a feat of surveying that rivaled the planning of any qanat. The data they gathered filled volumes known as Zijj, astronomical tables that catalogued the positions of stars, the paths of planets, and the timing of eclipses. This was not knowledge for its own sake, it was the operating system for a civilization. In the trackless desert, where landmarks were few, these tables allowed navigators to find their way by the stars, turning the empty expanse into a charted space. They enabled the precise calculation of prayer times and the dates of religious festivals, anchoring community life to a cosmic rhythm. They informed agricultural calendars, dictating the optimal times for planting and harvest based on solar and lunar cycles. The observatory, therefore, was the ultimate fusion of abstract science and concrete need. It proved that to master the earth, one first had to understand the heavens. The dry desert air, so hostile to life, provided the perfect window, and medieval engineers built the frame. Their work whispers that the most practical tool for survival might sometimes be a silent, stone eye gazing eternally upward, translating the mathematics of the universe into a guide for finding water, home, and meaning in a vast and silent world. A society's blueprint can be woven from goat hair and carried on a camel's back. For the nomadic Bedouin and countless other tribes across the world's deserts, permanence was not the goal, mobility was the masterpiece. Their entire existence was an act of fluid engineering, a brilliant adaptation to an environment where resources were scattered, and the map was constantly being redrawn by the wind. Their most iconic invention, the black tent, is a marvel of portable architecture. Woven from the hair of the black goat, its fabric is perfectly suited to the extremes. The dark color absorbs the sun's heat during the chilly desert nights, while the coarse, loosely woven fibers expand when wet, sealing the tent during rare rains and contract in the dry heat, creating tiny gaps that allow hot air to escape and a cooling breeze to flow through. This was climate control you could fold up and take with you. The tent structure was equally ingenious, with poles and tension ropes allowing for quick assembly and disassembly by the family unit, and its orientation could be shifted to block prevailing winds or capture gentle air currents. This was not a temporary shelter, but a sophisticated, reusable home engineered for a life in motion. The same deep understanding applied to their relationship with the desert's ship, the camel. They developed saddles that distributed weight perfectly for long journeys, and an encyclopedic knowledge of animal husbandry that turned the camel into a walking reservoir, a source of wool and milk, and the very engine of their economy. But perhaps their most vital engineering was not physical at all, it was cognitive. They carried a mental map of the desert, a living database passed down through generations in poetry and story. They knew the locations of Bir al-Gaith, the hidden wells that only appear after rare rains, and the subtle signs that indicated a patch of scrubland would be ready for grazing in 2 weeks' time. Their social structures were engineered for this unpredictability, with complex systems of hospitality and resource sharing that guaranteed no one would be left behind in the harsh landscape. A traveler in need could always find shelter and sustenance, a social safety net woven into the cultural fabric. This nomadic way of life was not separate from the world of qanats and fortified cities. It was its essential counterpart. Nomads were the connectors, the long-distance traders who moved goods and ideas between isolated oases. They often served as guides and protectors for caravans, their survival skills making the fixed trade routes possible. In times of drought, settled communities might rely on nomadic knowledge to find emergency water sources, while nomads might trade their animals and goods for the grain and crafted tools of the settled towns. Together, they formed a complete, symbiotic human ecosystem within the arid landscape. One was the anchor, deeply invested in transforming a single point, and the other was the compass, master of the vast spaces in between. This duality reveals the full spectrum of desert ingenuity, proving that there is no single answer to survival, only a range of brilliant strategies, from the deeply rooted to the forever moving, all in conversation with an unforgiving but magnificent world. The harvest was only the first half of the equation. Beneath the sun-baked courtyards of North African villages and the arid plains of the Middle East, another critical engineering task unfolded in absolute darkness. These were the Matmora's subterranean granaries that turned the earth itself into a vast, natural refrigerator. In a landscape where surface temperatures could spoil a season's grain in weeks, and where locusts, rodents, and human conflict were constant threats, the true challenge was not just growing food, but guarding it through uncertain years. The Matmora was the answer, a masterpiece of preservation that secured the future. Digging one was a precise and laborious craft. First, a deep, bottle-shaped pit was excavated, sometimes reaching depths of over 10 meters. The narrow neck at the top would become the only entrance, a design that immediately deterred unauthorized access. The walls were then meticulously lined with a thick layer of clay plaster, often mixed with straw or ash, which dried to a hard, impermeable seal. This lining was the key. It prevented moisture from the surrounding earth from seeping in and spoiling the grain, while also creating a barrier against insects and burrowing pests. The final step was the sealing mechanism, a masterpiece of simple security. A large, flat stone slab would be placed over the opening, then covered with more clay or earth, sometimes stamped with a family seal. To an outsider, it was invisible, just another patch of hard-packed ground. But to the community, it was their bank vault filled with the currency of survival. Some Matmoras were colossal communal structures, serving an entire village or clan, their management governed by strict rules and shared responsibility. Others were smaller, family-owned silos, dotting the landscape like hidden roots. The genius of this system lay in its environmental logic. Underground, the temperature remained cool and stable year-round, halting the germination of seeds and the growth of mold. The sealed, oxygen-poor environment within the pit also discouraged pests. This was food security engineered into the geology, allowing a community to store surplus harvests not just for months but for several years. A good season could therefore cushion the blow of many bad ones. This technology reveals a profound, holistic understanding of the ecosystem. These farmers were not just botanists, they were material scientists experimenting with plaster mixes and entomologists outsmarting insects with clever design. The Matmora ensured that the hard work of irrigation and cultivation did not vanish with the next drought or invasion. It transformed grain from a perishable good into a strategic reserve, a buffer against the desert's unpredictability. In doing so, it granted something priceless, not just full bellies, but the confidence to plan, to invest, and to build a society with a tomorrow. The true measure of their wealth was not what glittered in the sun, but what rested, safe and silent, in the cool, faithful dark beneath their feet. A city does not vanish in a single day. The silence that now fills these underground chambers and dry canals arrived slowly, a quiet guest welcomed by 1,000 small surrenders. Deciphering why these brilliant worlds were forgotten is not a search for a single villain, but for a tapestry of unraveling threads. Often, the first thread to snap was economic. The great trade routes that once pulsed with life, the Silk Road and the Saharan caravans, were not fixed highways. They shifted with the politics and preferences of empires. A new sultan might favor a different pass, a war could close a border, or the rising power of sea trade could make the dangerous desert crossing seem less worthwhile. When the caravans stopped coming, the caravanserais emptied. The engineers and merchants who maintained the surrounding qanats and farms would drift away in search of opportunity, leaving the intricate systems without their caretakers. A single abandoned way station could be a symptom, but a whole network falling silent meant the lifeblood of the region had been diverted elsewhere. Another relentless force was the very climate they had mastered so ingeniously. The medieval climate was not static, and long-term shifts could subtly break a covenant with the land. A period of prolonged drought, a slight decrease in rainfall over generations, could lower the water table beyond the reach of even the deepest mother well. A qanat, once a gushing source, might become a trickle, then a damp stain on the tunnel wall, and finally, just a dry hole in the ground. Without water, the gardens died, the soil blew away, and the reason for the city's existence simply evaporated. Sometimes the enemy was not absence, but overwhelming presence. A catastrophic flood could silt up the delicate channels of a Foggara or a stepwell with debris, a repair job so monumental that a diminished community could no longer muster the collective will or manpower to undertake it. The environment they had engineered with such precision could, with a sustained shift, become an equation they could no longer solve. Human conflict, of course, played its part. While the underground cities of Cappadocia offered refuge, they were a last resort. Sustained political instability, the rise and fall of local dynasties, or the arrival of new armies could disrupt the social order that maintained these complex communal projects. If the shared laws governing water rights broke down, or if a population was displaced, the knowledge and the cooperative spirit needed to clean a qanat or repair a granary roof could be lost within a generation. The technology remained etched in stone, but the living society that operated it had moved on, sometimes to newer regions with more reliable water or greater safety. It is crucial to understand that this abandonment was rarely a dramatic, sudden collapse. It was more often a slow fading. A family might leave first, then another. The maintenance schedule for the irrigation channel might slip from every season to every other year. Weeds would begin to grow in the once meticulously cleaned watercourse. One year, the community festival to celebrate the water's flow would not be held. The process was so gradual that the last person to leave might not have thought they were abandoning a city, but simply moving from a place that was no longer what it once was. This is why studying these silences is as important as studying the achievements. These ruins are not just monuments to what was built, but to what was lost. They teach a humbling lesson about sustainability. It is not a trophy you win and keep forever, but a continuous, active practice. It requires not just the intelligence to build a system, but the resilience to adapt it, the social cohesion to maintain it, and sometimes the wisdom to know when its time has passed. The forgotten world beneath the desert shows us that the most advanced engineering can be rendered obsolete by a change in the wind. a shift in a trade route, or a slow retreat of the rains. Their legacy, therefore, is a double one. It is a soaring testament to human ingenuity in the face of scarcity, and a quiet, sobering reminder that no civilization, no matter how clever, is ever granted a permanent stay against the forces of nature and time. They ask us in our own era of profound change, what we are building that is both brilliant enough to thrive and resilient enough to be remembered. The highlands of medieval Ethiopia held a different kind of wilderness, one of soaring plateaus and rugged stone. In this formidable landscape, a vision took root that would become one of humanity's most audacious acts of creation. During the 12th and 13th centuries, in a place called Lalibela, engineers and artisans embarked on a project that defied conventional architecture. They did not build upward with brick or timber. Instead, they carved downward directly into the living volcanic rock to sculpt 11 monolithic churches from the earth itself. The most iconic of these is Bete Georgis, the Church of St. George. From above, it reveals itself as a perfect Greek cross, a breathtaking geometric form sunk into a deep, rectangular pit. To create it and the other 10 churches, the builders executed a process of profound subtraction. First, they excavated massive, deep trenches in the red tuff stone, isolating a single, gigantic block of rock from the surrounding plateau. Then, with extraordinary patience and precision, they began the work of hollowing. From the top of this isolated block, they carved downward, chiseling out the interior space to create soaring naves, rows of supporting columns, arched windows, and detailed altars. They were not decorating a cave, they were revealing a building that had always been waiting inside the stone. The entire complex is connected by an intricate, labyrinthine network of tunnels, ceremonial passages, and cleverly hidden drainage channels that protect the structures from the region's heavy seasonal rains. This was not merely construction, it was a form of spiritual excavation. King Lalibela, for whom the site is named, envisioned a new Jerusalem for pilgrims who could no longer safely reach the Holy Land. Every aspect of the site, from the orientation of the churches to the symbolism in their carvings, reflects this sacred ambition. The project represents a zenith of rock-cut engineering, where faith provided the blueprint and unwavering skill provided the hand. It stands as a powerful parallel to the underground cities of Cappadocia, yet with a purely devotional heart. These churches were not designed for refuge from armies, but for connection to the divine. They demonstrate that the drive to shape an inhospitable environment springs from many sources, from the need for water and security to the profound desire to manifest heaven on earth. The silent, sunken sanctuaries of Lalibela remind us that the most enduring monuments are often not those placed upon the land, but those patiently, reverently called forth from within it. The rediscovery of these sites often began with a single, careless footprint. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, explorers fueled by romantic notions of lost cities would arrive at a desert site, marvel at its engineering, and then proceed to extract its heart. They would remove intricately carved lintels, delicate pottery, and inscribed tablets, packing them into crates bound for distant museums. While these objects were preserved, their story was shattered. A pot is just a pot until you know which room it was found in, what residue lies inside it, and what other objects lay beside it. That context, the precise layer of soil, and the spatial relationship to a hearth or a tool, is the true narrative. By lifting artifacts without recording this information, those early adventurers created beautiful but silent orphans, stripping them of their ability to tell us how people actually lived. The site itself was often left scarred by haphazard trenches, its stratigraphic layers scrambled, making it impossible for later scholars to read its chronological story. This approach treated the desert not as a library, but as a treasure chest to be plundered, prioritizing possession over understanding. Modern archaeology has undergone a profound shift in philosophy. Today, the guiding principle is often to preserve in situ, meaning to leave things in their original place whenever possible. The goal is no longer simply to find, but to understand without destroying. This is made possible by an array of non-invasive tools. High-resolution three-dimensional laser scanning can create a perfect digital twin of an entire site or a single artifact, capturing every crack and contour. Photogrammetry uses hundreds of overlapping photographs to build explorable three-dimensional models. These digital records become permanent archives, allowing researchers across the globe to study a fragile fresco or a collapsing wall without ever touching it. When excavation is necessary, it is conducted with the precision of surgery. Each square meter is a crime scene of history, with every shard of pottery, every seed, every stain in the earth meticulously photographed, mapped, and catalogued before being moved. The question has changed from what can we take to what can we learn by leaving as much as we can right where it is. This new ethic extends beyond the trench to the living communities connected to these places. For many sites, there are descendant populations whose cultural heritage and even identity are intertwined with these ancient engineers. Ethical practice now demands their involvement from the very beginning. This means collaborative research designs, shared training opportunities, and decisions made in partnership. When knowledge is recovered about ancestral water management practices or building techniques, it belongs first to those communities. Archaeologists act not as authoritative interpreters, but as facilitators in a conversation, helping to piece together a story that has deep personal and cultural resonance. This partnership enriches the research immeasurably, as local knowledge can explain the purpose of a mysterious feature or the traditional name of a plant used in ancient plaster, details no outsider could ever guess. A pressing and difficult debate surrounds what we do with a site once it is studied. Should it be restored to its imagined former glory to inspire tourists, or conserved as a ruin that honestly shows the passage of time? Extensive reconstruction can make a place visually stunning and economically viable, but it risks creating a historical fantasy, covering the authentic marks of age with new mortar. It can also place unsustainable pressure on fragile remains. Conversely, conserving a site as a stabilized ruin respects its authenticity, but may make it harder for the public to grasp its original scale and splendor. There is no perfect answer, only a balance that must be struck for each unique place, weighing educational value, structural safety, and long-term preservation. The central aim, however, is clear: to protect the physical integrity and truthful story of the site for future generations, not just to optimize it for the present. The process of discovery, therefore, has been re-engineered itself. It is no longer a solitary hunt for treasure, but a multidisciplinary practice of stewardship. It combines the meticulous science of soil analysis with the diplomacy of community dialogue, the wizardry of digital mapping with the patience of long-term conservation planning. We are learning that to truly honor the forgotten world beneath the desert, we must listen more than we speak, preserve more than we extract, and collaborate more than we command. The ultimate lesson these ancient engineers may have for us is about legacy, about building things that last not just in stone, but in the respectful way they are remembered and cared for. Their silent cities now ask us a final, profound question. Will we be the generation that finally learns to uncover the past without burying its true meaning? Ancient blueprints are finding new life in the drafting rooms of our own century. As contemporary architects and engineers confront the urgent challenges of a warming planet, they are turning an unexpected page, looking back to the medieval desert for inspiration. This is not nostalgia, it is a practical search for proven logic in a time of crisis. The very constraints those ancient builders faced, scarcity of water and extremes of temperature, are becoming global realities, making their solutions startlingly relevant. In their passive, elegant designs, we are rediscovering a philosophy of working with nature that offers powerful alternatives to our own energy-intensive systems. The thick adobe walls of a ksar or a desert dwelling performed a quiet miracle of thermal regulation, absorbing heat by day and releasing it by night. Modern sustainable architecture has embraced this principle, now called thermal mass. Today's builders use rammed earth, thick stone, and advanced phase change materials within walls to replicate that same passive cooling and heating effect, drastically reducing the need for air conditioning and furnaces. A contemporary home in the American Southwest or a university building in Morocco might not look like a fortress, but its temperature stability is engineered with the same ancient insight. Leverage the properties of local materials to create comfort without constant power. This is low-tech, high-efficiency design at its best, and its roots are centuries deep. Similarly, the hydrological genius of the Kanat and the Foggara is being revisited with fresh eyes. In regions battling severe drought and overpumped aquifers, the principle of a gently sloping, gravity-fed tunnel that minimizes evaporation is more than historical curiosity. It is a compelling model for sustainable irrigation. Agricultural researchers and water management agencies are studying these systems to develop modern analogs, using updated materials but the same core physics, to deliver water efficiently to crops in arid zones. The goal is the same: to use gravity instead of diesel pumps to protect water from the sun and to recharge groundwater rather than deplete it. Perhaps the most profound lesson, however, is not in the stone or the water, but in the social blueprint. The community-based management of the Foggara, with its intricate time-share system and collective maintenance duty, presents a powerful case study for local water governance. In an era of top-down infrastructure that can fail when centralized systems break down, the Foggara model demonstrates the resilience of distributed, community-owned resource management. It shows that the most durable system is often the one where every user has a direct stake in its care and longevity. This ancient wisdom, born of sheer necessity, provides a counter-narrative to our assumption that newer and more complex is always better. It reminds us that elegance often lies in simplicity, and that resilience is built not just on technology, but on social cohesion and shared responsibility. By revisiting the forgotten world beneath the desert, we are not merely exploring a fascinating chapter of history, we are actively mining it for viable futures. The past, it turns out, holds meticulously tested blueprints for living within our means, for designing systems that endure because they are in dialogue with their environment. Their legacy challenges us to ask, in our race for innovation, what profound solutions have we overlooked because they were written not in code, but in clay, and whispered not in data streams, but in the quiet, gravity-fed flow of a hidden stream. These threads of water, stone, and community weave into a single, magnificent tapestry. When we step back to view the forgotten world in its entirety, from the Foggaras of North Africa to the Stepwells of India and the rock-hewn churches of Ethiopia, a profound truth comes into focus. These were not separate, isolated achievements born in cultural bubbles. They were variations on a grand, human theme, a global symphony of ingenuity composed in response to the same universal challenges. Every society, regardless of faith or origin, faced the relentless equations of survival in arid lands. How do we find and keep water? How do we secure our people and our harvests? How do we build communities that can cooperate on a scale large enough to reshape their world? And how do we connect with others to share knowledge and goods across vast, empty spaces? The brilliant diversity of their answers reveals a stunning convergence of thought. A Persian muqani digging a qanat and an Indian architect descending a stepwell staircase were, in essence, engaging in the same profound dialogue with their environment. They were both using gravity, geometry, and deep local knowledge to solve the problem of scarcity. The underground cities of Cappadocia and the fortified Ksars of the Sahara, though continents apart, shared the same foundational insight that true security could be engineered into the very fabric of a community's home, whether carved downward or built upward. This parallel development is not a coincidence. It is evidence of a shared human capacity for innovation when pressed against necessity. The desert, in its harsh majesty, did not simply host these civilizations, it actively shaped them. By presenting a landscape of extreme scarcity, it forced a clarity of purpose. There was no room for waste, for overly complex solutions that could not be maintained, or for social systems that fostered discord. The environment demanded efficiency, cooperation, and long-term thinking. It acted as the ultimate catalyst, compressing the need for invention and compelling societies to reach into the deepest wells of their collective creativity. In doing so, they engineered something far greater than individual structures. They engineered sustainable ways of life, complete social and technological packages that were in harmony, or at least in workable conversation with their world. The Caravanserai enabled the trade that spread these ideas, the legal frameworks maintained the systems, and the spiritual beliefs gave the work transcendent meaning. This interconnected tapestry shows us that our medieval ancestors were not primitive, but profoundly sophisticated systems thinkers. They understood that a water channel is useless without the social agreement to maintain it, that a granary is pointless without the agricultural wisdom to fill it, and that a trade route will vanish without the engineering to make it safe. Their legacy, therefore, is not a list of cool ancient gadgets. It is a holistic philosophy of resilience. It suggests that the most enduring human achievements are those that address our core needs in an integrated way, weaving together technology, social organization, and cultural meaning into a single, resilient strand. As we face our own era of environmental and social challenge, this forgotten tapestry offers a quiet but powerful invitation. It asks us to look beyond the isolated, shiny solution and to consider how we might weave our own systems so that what we build for water, for community, and for connection might also be designed to last. The sands hold more than dust, they hold the fingerprints of master engineers. Our journey through this forgotten world reveals a landscape etched not by chance, but by profound intelligence. From the whispering tunnels of the Kanat to the silent grandeur of rock-hewn churches, each structure is a chapter in humanity's enduring dialogue with a challenging planet. These societies did not see the desert as an enemy to be conquered, but as a partner in a delicate, necessary conversation. Their greatest innovation was a mindset, one that understood constraint not as a limit, but as the very source of creative possibility. When water was scarce, they became hydrological poets, coaxing rivers from stone. When security was fragile, they turned the earth itself into a shield. Their brilliance lay in listening to the land and responding with elegant, integrated solutions. They teach us that true sustainability is not a single technology, but a tapestry woven from technical skill, social cohesion, and a deep reverence for the systems that sustain life. It was the communal law that maintained the Foggara, the shared faith that raised the Stepwell, and the collective labor that carved the underground city. Their legacy is a powerful reminder that our most enduring creations are those that answer our deepest needs for security, community, and meaning all at once. As we now face our own environmental frontiers with challenges of scarcity and climate that echo theirs, these hidden wonders offer more than historical curiosity. They offer inspiration. They stand as proof that human ingenuity, when guided by patience, cooperation, and a long-term vision, can build oases of resilience in the most unexpected places. Their silent stones ask us to consider what we might build, not in spite of our constraints, but because of them. If you found this exploration of lost ingenuity fascinating, subscribe for more journeys into history's hidden chapters. Let us know in the comments which of these desert marvels amazes you the most.